I really should be an actor. I've got incredible range. I have to just looking at myself. I have to. I gotta hand it to myself. All right, time for some faces here. Let's begin with your feelings on this finals matchup. All right, surprise me with something here.
Tyler Hansbrough.
That was good. That was quite surprising. Quite surprising. He was getting playoff minutes. I don't know if it was 10 years ago. I can't remember when. He definitely was on that 2011 Pacers team. I can't remember when they finally moved on from him. Okay, one more here. The luxury tax situation for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I really should be an actor. I've got incredible range. I have to just looking at myself. I have to. I gotta hand it to myself.
Nate Duncan. Or something like that. That was the best one I could come up with on short notice.
All right, let's start the podcast.
Yes.
All right, welcome on to a very special Hollinger and Duncan. We started doing this, I want to say maybe in 2021. And the reason we did is because the landscape of the league had changed. And under the 2017 CBA, extensions were more possible. For the first couple of years of that, you still had a lot of contracts that had been signed and pre-cap spike in 2016. And so extensions weren't really possible. And so the last summer where guys really all got to free agency was 2019. It became clear after that no, the new thing is going to be just signing extensions with your current team. And that was really an aberration in NBA history that you had kind of this 10-year period or so with both the cap spike and very restrictive owners saving themselves from themselves extension rules. So now this is like one of the biggest things that we have to analyze is how much are these extensions going to be. But before we get into that, John, you got anything you want to talk about finals wise? Any kind of like maybe contrarian takes, or we've both done a ton of work on it, obviously, but anything that sticks out to you as something that isn't being discussed enough here?
Well, I'm coming to you from the TV quality lighting of the Boston Marriott, if you cannot tell, where I just came from media day at the finals, where both these teams were too smart to say anything incendiary. Porzingis said nice things about the Mavs. Kyrie said nice things about Boston. It's all love, whatever. As far as the series goes, I think Boston is definitely the favorite. I think they can do more things defensively against Luka than what the Mavericks faced in the other playoff rounds. And I think offensively, Dallas's strategy has to completely change against the Celtics versus what they did against these other opponents. So even though Dallas has the best player in Luka, he has to be the best player, like for them to have any chance. So it's going to be interesting. I think it'll be a competitive series, but I do expect Boston to win.
This was my take on it. Is I think I have a pretty good handle on what's going to happen on Dallas's offensive end. I think Boston will do a pretty good job of taking them out of transition, pretty good job of not making mistakes. But in the end, like, Luka's too good, and he and the Mavs are going to get theirs to some degree. I don't think they're going to be just blowing them out of the water, 125 offensive rating every game. But I don't see the Mavs getting like shut down by this Boston defense. To me, more of the variables in this series, starting perhaps with Kristaps Porzingis' offensive output and the Mavs defense that likes to keep a center close to the rim versus real 5-out spacing that we thought Oklahoma City had, but they didn't. that is going to be, to me, like, who's going to win that battle? I don't for sure know the answer to.
So for you, then the tipping point is more when Boston has the ball, because you think that's kind of a higher variance scenario.
Yeah, I mean, in Boston, as much as they don't have Luka Doncic, as much as people complain about their offense, like after the break, they were like a 128 offensive rating. Like it was just absolutely insane what they're doing at a time when all the refereeing was changing. Offensive ratings were down a couple of points, which almost never happens in the second half of the year. Boston's offense is going completely crazy, and nobody really for any kind of extended period has had much success against them. Admittedly, not going up against a murderous row, to put it charitably here, in the Eastern Conference playoffs. And then Porzingis is back, and I don't know exactly what they're going to get out of him and whether he'll be able to beat switches and stuff of that ilk. So, yeah, I do think that I mean, maybe this is just overthinking it, and like this is an awesome offense. An awesome offense beats great defense, which the Mavs have proven themselves to be, I would say. So, but I think there's, like, I'm giving enough respect to the Mavs, who I didn't give enough respect to in previous series, for their defense, and that this is going to be a group that's going to be tough. I don't know who's going to win that battle.
I'm excited for it. I think this could be. I think this could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, and my pick was Boston in 6, more just because I didn't want to pick Boston. Like, I see it as more of a Boston in 7, but I'm also like, man, if it gets to 7, Luka Doncic in a game 7, he's been
a little nervous.
He's
about
been
that
pretty
one,
good.
Right? Yeah,
he's been pretty darn good in a elimination game or closeout games, more accurately, and obviously closeout king Kyrie Irving on his side as well. I guess that's the other thing that I'm kind of thinking. How do you think Irving's going to play in this series?
I think he'll be good. I mean, the crowd here is definitely going to be all over him, which will be interesting to see how he reacts to that in game 1. But yeah, I think he'll be good. I think he'll have his moments, especially when Luka is off the floor. Although that's going to be interesting for him going up against 2 really tough guards in those non-Luka minutes. I would think Boston would try to stagger White and Holiday so that one of them can definitely be on the floor for those minutes when Kyrie is running the offense. And so that's going to be a little challenging for him. But, I mean, I said Luka has to be the best player. Now, the flip side of that is if Kyrie is also the second best player, then Boston is screwed, right? Like, at the very least, they need Tatum to be better than Kyrie.
I don't think Kyrie is going to be the second best player, and I think Boston's going to do a pretty good job on him. I think obviously he'll have some moments, but they take away transition, which is probably where he's at his most dangerous. They do a pretty good job there. I think Holiday, from going back to that Nets series with the Bucks, I thought that turned when they stopped trying to put Drew Holiday on Kevin Durant and started putting him on Kyrie Irving, and they really caused Kyrie to struggle. Then, of course, a game and a half into that tactic, he sprains his ankle and he's out of the series. But I think Drew could do a pretty good job on Kyrie. And now maybe there's enough switching where Kyrie can find some other matchups that he wants to attack. But, I do think that he is going to have a few problems in this series, even more so than in the last series.
So do you think it's Drew on Kyrie then?
If I were running the team, yeah.
That puts White on Luka?
Brown on Luka.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Now, of course, that'll change once some bench units get out there and stuff like that. So, yeah, I can't buy Boston as a clear favorite because I think the Mavs are just that good, and they've been like Boston with Porzingis coming back and having to play a real team for the first time is going to have to deal with a change, I would say. But and also Luka could just be feeling better too. Like, we haven't really seen him at his absolute peak yet, except for some stretches. All right, anything else that you wanted to hit on from that series, or should we move to the extensions?
Let's move to the extensions. Yeah, I think we'll get some answers on this series, once a couple games have been played, and then we'll have some things to talk about.
So, just from the executive standpoint here, what are you thinking as you get into these extension negotiations. And, we'll just to remind some of the general rules on these, you cannot extend until it's been 2 years from the beginning of the contract that you signed. It has to be at least a 3-year contract for there to be an extension. And if you're going to sign an extension with 2 or more years remaining on your contract, that has to be done before the start of the season. If you only have 1 year remaining on your contract, you can do that at any point up until June 30th when your contract expires. So what are you thinking about as an executive? Like, are we going to extend this guy or not? And coming up with a price vis-a-vis maybe what you might pay a guy in free agency.
Sure. I'm thinking about a few things if I'm an executive. First of all, I'm thinking about the cap and what's going to happen with the cap. From what's been leaked out about TV negotiations so far, it seems like we are headed for max cap raises every year after this one. This coming year, we're only going to get about 3.7% according to the league's guidance. Every year after that will be the maximum 10%. So I anticipate the cap to rise sharply in the out years when I look 3, 4, 5 years out, which waters down some of the out year risk on signing these extensions. The other thing I always looked at, I'm coming at this from small market mindset in Memphis, where my mindset was always retain rights to players, because you're not going to be a player in the free agent market for a lot of guys. I mean, we were able to sign some free agents, but there's a certain set of players where you're just not going to be in the running ever. And so your focus is more, you retain rights to players, you can do trades. If you don't have any players, you can't do anything other than overpay somebody. So that was sort of my bias when I was in Memphis. Like, maybe if I'm in New York or LA, I have a different mindset about that. Certainly Philadelphia has. They've opted for cap room, and we'll see how that goes for them. So that's where my head would be. And I think the other thing is extensions beget more extensions. In other words, every extension waters down a future free agent market such that it gives other teams the incentive to also extend their own players, because there is no benefit to cap space because all the good free agents have already been extended. If that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, I think so. I think that we are going to see, perhaps in general here, a little bit more belt tightening than we've seen on some of these in the past. And because you mentioned that there just is not going to be that big of a cap rise this year, I think part of that is just due to some of the local TV stuff that's happening with Diamond Sports, and we still don't know where that is. And then you're going to have the 10% raises after that. But that's not, if you're giving out maximum raises on an extension, that's 8%. So you're now that doesn't compound, at least. So, as you go further out, you do start to see more of a delta between the raise and the extension versus the raise and the cap. But it's not a huge one necessarily. But I think, particularly now with the second apron, and a lot of teams are right in there already, as we're talking about. And part of the reason that they are right in there is because maybe they went a little crazy on some extensions, right? And so, to be clear, we're only doing veteran extensions here. We're not doing rookie extensions. But you look at like the Michael Porter Jr. contract in Denver, where if they just held out a little bit longer, maybe they could have. They wouldn't be in the situation that they're in, where they're like, can we really retain KCP now or not? And we've seen a lot of other big money extensions for older guys. Obviously Bradley Beal is another one where Phoenix is now kind of in it with him, although that was a bad contract in Washington. So there are a lot of these that I think, with the cap not going up that much this year in particular, teams will be like, second apron, terrifying. So many teams are in trouble here. So hard to get off of money. But based on what you said, I actually think maybe, right, and so a perfect example of that is Brandon Ingram, right? Where it sounds like there's reporting that they're not willing to just offer him the 30% max extension. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong necessarily. Like, they are definitely in it, in part due to like the crazy extension that they gave CJ McCollum. So you understand why maybe they don't want to do that, and maybe they shouldn't do that for that level of player. But also, I think we're going to kind of see like almost too much belt tightening on some of these, because people are going to be in this like feeling cash poor right now with the low cap rise and also the fact that the second apron is kicking in, when mentally, 4 years from now, there's just going to be a lot more wiggle room than people realize at this moment, would be my thought.
Yeah, especially as other contracts they have obviously come off the books. And you'll see, you will see some teams, I think, as we move into this punitive second apron era. We've talked about this a little, but the rules basically incentivize you to make a 2-year run above that second apron and then pull back, because the penalties become so harsh after that with the frozen draft pick and potentially moving to the back of the line and whatnot. So it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to me to see how many teams, starting with 24-25, go in for 2 and then back out. Boston's a team that could be in that situation. Certainly Minnesota, certainly the Clippers, possibly
Phoenix.
Phoenix. Yeah, Golden State will probably pull out right away. But there's going to be a couple. It could be, Dallas is going to be, maybe not next year, but that's coming for them too.
Okay, so enough prevarication here. As we looked at this list that Dan put together, that's going to be available for Dunked On Prime subscribers, of every player of note who is extension eligible here and exactly how much they can get and what their current contract is. We provide all that for subscribers. So what team most interests you in terms of this list of guys?
The most interesting, probably Boston, just in terms of what they do with Derrick White. That's a really interesting one, because Tatum's is a no-brainer, right? You're definitely going to do that.
Yes, yeah, that one is done. He is eligible already. So yeah, that would kick in for next year, and it would be a 5-year, $314.8 million extension based on our projection of the salary cap right now. So he would decline his player option for next year and could then sign that. Guys in the 2017 draft are eligible to sign designated player veteran extensions, whereas guys in the 2018 draft have to wait 1 more year.
So that contract will basically put you at the tax line before you pay White or Horford. Horford probably, I presume, wouldn't command that much. He's extension eligible too. He could technically get, up to $17 million a year. I don't know if his number is going to be that much, coming up from 9.5 at age 38.
I think they just let that one play out. That seems pretty obvious. There's no reason you could do that during the season too. There's no reason to do that one right now.
Yeah, but Derrick White, he has a decision to make too, right? Because Boston can offer him 4 years for 122, and at his age, right, that's taking him to his mid-30s basically. Or does he think he can do better than that if he has another good year next year, and he's coming up from, quote unquote, only making $20 million? If Derrick White as an unrestricted free agent in 25 would be very near the top of the board, I imagine, by the time all the other extensions play out. So that's something that he at least has to think about, right? There could be, crazy Detroit money out there for me or something, where I could get $150 million. So I think he has to at least think about that for sure.
Well, so he's going to be 31 when this extension kicks in. You're getting his 31, 32, 33, 34 seasons if they offer it now. And they can offer him that 4 years, a little over 122. So a little over $30 million a year. Do you just make that offer with whatever bells and whistles you want? Is that just automatic? You make that 4-year offer if you're Boston?
Given where Boston is right now and its contender cycle, I would be really tempted to do that, because you have no means of replacing him. So what are you counting? Are you counting on doing better than that in the open market? Are you can you shave?
Yeah, the only concern is the year is to take him up to age 34, 35. We're not as much as like Drew Holiday, has been really good in these playoffs. I mean, they just offered him a huge deal too.
Yes.
They are at some point, as you noted, going to need to get out of the second apron. But would you rather? I mean, you can also take this one into the season too. But yeah, considering that that's the maximum that you can offer him, I mean, I think you probably, especially with the way things are going up. So yeah, give you guys a little context here, right? So 27 million is what he would start at. He would finish at 34. So when you look at that number, the 25% max in those years is just always important with this rising cap to remember this. The 25% max in those years is going to be 38 through 51, right? So, that's the 25% max. That's not like an untradeable deal. And I also like Derrick White, the way he's improved to shoot the ball this year. I think like he's going to be a valuable player. Like in that era, as long as the guy is still like even a starter, that's like fine money for him. So unless you're worried, and maybe by the end of that, he's not quite a starter at age 34, 35, but he is the first couple. I agree. I think the more I think about it, I think I'm just offering him that full ball. And we'll talk about this in some other circumstances. I would actually almost want him to have a player option in that last year as well. I think that's actually
you have some flexibility to wriggle out of some things too, where you could say, hey, take the player option. We'll split this money over a couple of years.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we'll call that the Draymond Green, right? He was one of the first to do that, of just decline the player option, take less, but extend it out longer. And that just lessens the cap hit, particularly again, as the cap is projected to rise by 10% every single one of these years. So yeah, I think I offer him the 3+1 there. I think I would do it. And then Sam Hauser is also an interesting one if we're talking about them. They do have a team option on him that they could decline if they were in a different circumstance. I would recommend they do that. However, and try to do the thing where, we're just declining your minimum team option, the Herb Jones, right? Or the Jayson Tate. But the problem is they're just so impacted by the tax next year that they probably need to just have that extension started the next year. So what's a fair extension for Sam Hauser?
So if Sam Hauser goes unrestricted, is he a full mid-level guy?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, think of like what George Niang got last year. Like Hauser's way better than George Niang. But like I don't think you're bringing him in to
start. It's just been proven by George Niang's performance since he got that contract. But yes, I mean, but my numbers have a crazy valuation on Hauser, which I think is
You're not bringing him in to start. He's not a starter, right? Yeah.
No, it's in Boston's system. He's a valuable player. The max you could give him, the max you could start him at is 17, which I think is pretty generous for a player of this ilk. But would you be okay going 4 for 50 with him?
That's probably
40?
about right in line. And Hauser, he's a little older. It's taken him a while to get onto the scene. So this will be ages basically 28. If he does a 4-year extension, like 28 to 31. But then again, and you would want to have it be like kind of because he's a guy that might end up just having to be traded. So I think maybe you try to go kind of like more of a flat deal. And then I guess it doesn't matter. The cap's going up so much. Maybe you start it as low as you can in year one in 25, 26. And because he is a very valuable player for them. Like he guards okay. He guards much better than most of these shooter types.
Exactly.
And he's got, really, and he shoots 40% on threes and he's got pretty high volume. So I mean, I think something in that exact range you're talking about is pretty good. Like he's giving you a little bit of a discount to get that life-changing money locked in a year early. But I don't know that he has the upside of getting paid like $20 million a year, even under this new environment. Cause that still is kind of going to be more lower end starter I'm not sure that someone's bringing him in under those circumstances.
I agree with that.
Okay, let me pick a team here.
All right.
Let's slide down to... there's so many interesting ones here. The Minnesota Timberwolves. And we just talked about this scenario. Rudy Gobert is actually extension eligible right now. Not something that's really been talked about. And he has a player option for $47 million that, for his age 33 season, that player option is in 25-26. It's probably going to overpay him. And Minnesota is also going to be facing a massive tax bill. So do you then just lower that $47 million down and extend him? Or are you willing to just take that to free agency? Or closer to the end? I might be inclined to wait that one out just a little bit if I'm Minnesota.
I think I would too, for a couple of reasons. I mean, first of all, the reality of Minnesota's situation, right? Let's wait and see who actually owns the team, and then we can start negotiating the next contract and how much money do they want to pay. I would also want to see a little, how does next year play out for them? Are they still true contender class next year? Is it worth them being an expensive team? What are they doing with Karl Towns? Because that impacts the entire cap logic of the team. So there's a lot of moving parts here. So I probably I would feel like I was putting the cart before the horse if I dealt with Gobert first.
I think that's right. And he has all the leverage right now because as of right now, you're looking like you're in absolute tax hell. And you also have him at $47 million next year. So, or in 25-26.
Yeah.
So he's like, well, okay, I'll do you a favor, but yeah, you're going to give me 4 years. It's going to be 4 years at $35 million a year, right? And you're going to pay me until I'm 37. He's coming off a Defensive Player of the Year season, and you also, as Minnesota, this is when you're on the high. That's when you can kind of make some of these mistakes as well. And they're just like, fuck it, we got to keep the team together. Yeah, we're gonna have to swallow this miserable luxury tax pill this year, but hey, at least we get some relief next year with Gobert's salary going down by $10 million. And who cares about the next 4 years? Well, the Minnesota Timberwolves actually care about the next 4 years because they have this guy named Anthony Edwards on their team, who's only 22. And you may reach this point where, okay, it's just not working. Towns takes a step back. Gobert is not Defensive Player of the Year. They're kind of more mid-pack in the West. They lose in the first round next year. And, they could also just get even better. That's a possibility too. But the West is quite brutal and they could have different matchups, right? They could have easily been playing Dallas in the first round and lost to Dallas in the first round. That's the way the West kind of works.
Yeah.
So to me, I would want to just wait. And, maybe we do it during the season as well. See how that's going. See what happens with Towns. I think there's just too many variables to lock in on what will probably be a bad contract. You've kind of gotten lucky that Gobert has come back the way that he has and that he is worth his contract that he's on right now. I just wouldn't want to get myself in a position where I don't have any flexibility to do anything. And as Anthony Edwards is nearing a point at which he might leave the team in year 6 or year 7, you've got 37-year-old Rudy Gobert making a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So if it's worth doing that if, okay, the only way this team looks great again in 24-25, the only way we can keep it together is Gobert taking less. Okay, then we'll do that once. But I'm not sure I want to bet on that quite yet. They've also got, let's see, anybody else? Josh Minott. Okay, let's move on. I think the next one to discuss is probably the New Orleans Pelicans.
Let's see what we got
with Ingram.
Here. Yeah. Oh, you know who else is extension eligible?
CJ McCollum.
CJ McCollum. Lock it in, baby. 3 years, 139. Who says no?
Oh man. So your colleague Will Guillory reported that the Pels are probably not looking to just give Brandon Ingram a maximum extension. Part of that is due to the fact that they also are going to need to extend Trey Murphy, which I expect to be, pretty lucrative for Murphy. And that the Ingram Zion fit, they're legitimate questions. Ingram's coming off a poor playoffs, admittedly without Zion next to him. That probably would have made things a little easier. Admittedly, coming back from an injury that was not an easy injury. Like I do think, as much as I've never been an Ingram fan, I think his perception right now is probably a little lower than is fair to him.
Yeah, because people overreacted to the playoffs when he was still coming back from the injury. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, and he's not he's not a number one offensive threat. Like I think everyone knows that about him. If he's in the proper role, I think he could potentially be a number two, although there obviously are fit issues with his defense. So, what do you think if you're New Orleans and you want to just get him on something that you think is fair? Forget about the whole ridiculous luxury tax situation and got to extend Murphy and all that. What's like a fair offer for Ingram? And while you think of that, the most that they could offer him would be 4 years, $208 million. So basically about $52 million a year over 4 years. That's starting essentially at the what is projected to be the 30% max in 25-26.
So I think Ingram is a $36 million player who makes $36 million. Like, I think his current contract is totally fine. But the problem is an extension for him at his max goes up to above 50 a year. And I just can't get there for him. To me, his is between like 145 and 160 over 4 years is probably what I'd be looking at.
I mean, I think 40 million is probably about right? Like, I think Sabonis, who made All NBA, we don't need to discuss that too much, but like he's kind of in that 40 million a year range, right? Like I think he and Ingram are like somewhat similar level of players in the sense that they're not like dominant guys who are going to lead a team past the first round of the playoffs, but are also really good players. And certainly when you consider
I think there's a big difference between the two, which is that Sabonis plays 80 games and Ingram plays like 50.
Yeah, no, that's a reasonable point. I think that is something to be concerned about. I think Ingram's been a little bit better lately, but yeah. So like this year, yeah. Although even that injury was like kind of one that wasn't necessarily like a freak injury, in terms of just like relating to his propensity to get injured. Yeah, I think like, especially when you consider the cap going up, 45 million a year over the life of the deal instead of 52, like kind of more like the 25% max over the life of the deal would be fair. And there are still going to be teams that really could use a player like that, right? Like, a team like the Pistons would always be willing to trade, well, I guess the Pistons are going to be in this state probably forever, but a team like the Pistons, in that we're like, oh, hey, we've been bad for a while, we got to get better. Like, yeah, they would take him off your hands at that, and like he does help them win basketball games, and they don't. The other thing too is you get him on that extension. There's no need to make a move with him this offseason. Like Murphy's contract doesn't kick in until next year, so I think you try to get him on that extension, smooth over whatever you need to smooth over. He gets paid, and then you deal with it a year from now. Just hoping that he doesn't suffer like a major injury. He's also only 27 too, so he was super young when he came into the league. So that's another feather in his cap for this.
I don't know that. I mean, yeah, you can. Like your best case scenario is that you sucker a shitty team aspiring to be mediocre to take him and give you stuff. I don't know.
But your best case scenario is that you get a top 4 seed in the West next year with him still on the team.
I suppose that could happen.
And also, frankly, with Zion not exactly the most reliable either, you do need, like, if Zion is out and Ingram isn't on the team, you're just never going to win any games in the regular season. Like, you need one of those guys available.
Yeah, and the history has been there's exactly one. But yeah, no, I agree with that. That is probably the best point, is that you need some star level resiliency, even if they don't fit with each other that well over an 82 game season. Just having that second guy who can take over, who can kind of take the wheel when the other one is out. I do think that is really important.
Well, and here's the other thing with New Orleans. I mean, CJ, as bad as that extension was, this year's is 33, next year is 31, and then it comes off the books. Especially given some of the assets that New Orleans has, like that might even be movable. Like I would much rather like sign Ingram to a market contract, and then like because I don't think like the terrible contract, and like it's not even that CJ is like, you know, it's been so awful for them, he's like so overpaid, but it's more just that given their tax situation that it just wasn't smart with all the stuff they had coming up, and it was an own goal. They just didn't need to sign him to that at the time that they did.
Yeah,
but like don't not sign your second best player because you spent way too much money on your essential third best player who's now your fourth best player. Like just do something to move on from that contract if you have to. They have plenty of assets instead of not signing Ingram because you have CJ at a number you don't like.
Okay, so you've turned my logic a little with 2 points here. One, their books are very clean going out. And two, to get to my previous point, this is a small market team. You probably do err on the side of keeping rights to players. Again, especially you go out, like the second year of the extension would be 26-27. Well, they have 3 players under contract that season.
Yeah, and Murphy will be a fourth, obviously, at that point too. But yeah, and would I say don't explore trading him? No, I'd look into that a little bit, maybe. Although, you know, you can always trade him at the trade deadline.
That's the other thing, though.
If
somebody does become available like that, I mean, you can put him in with your draft assets, and then matching contract is there, bam, and you might be able to do something to get a name to New Orleans that you otherwise might not be able to get.
Yeah. So, and I just like they're pretty good right now. Like I think that they won 49 games this year, and they could possibly win more. So I think next year, like this is how their team is built, is to try to win right now. So to move your second best player, like, okay, if you can get someone back that's gonna, you know, a couple of guys back, but they already have plenty of depth. Like it's not like they need more depth on the wing or something. Maybe if they lose Najee Marshall, they'll feel that way. I don't know. So or, you know, would you move Ingram for a center? Like, I'm not sure who's available that would be. So
Jared Allen, like Ingram for Jared Allen. Would you do that?
You know, I posited this one of CJ and Ingram for Darius Garland and Jared Allen, with the Pels throwing more in.
The internet breaker. I like it. That's definitely interesting. I worry a little about, like, does Jared Allen fit with Zion?
Defensively, it does. I think it's like Zion is just such a ridiculous finisher that I think he might be able to make it work. And, you know, hopefully then Allen has a pretty large catch radius as well. Zion's like a decent passer. Like I think, like, basically what you're thinking about is, can Zion score in a 2-on-2 between his man, and then also, like, if you're going to put your center on Zion, then Allen kind of has an easier matchup on the boards and stuff. Like, I think I would certainly feel better about that than with Larry Nance and Valanciunas, right? But, maybe we're getting too far afield here. So let's.
Yeah.
And then Jose Alvarado is another interesting one for the Pels. Just hasn't been able to stay healthy with that rugged style. He's already 26. But, you know, there is some sort of TJ McConnell sort of feeling about him.
And because he has the team option this year, you could do something where you decline the team option to give him 20 over 3 or something like that.
That doesn't seem like enough. Maybe because you're giving him more. You're saying because
Yeah,
with
exactly.
the team option.
The bag you're giving him is worth 18, right? Because he's only making 1.9 this coming year.
Yeah, I mean, what's a reasonable deal for him? Not considering that, right? Would it be like 3 years, 25 million?
I guess that's where I was headed toward. My numbers have him worth 12 million for this coming year, so maybe I undersold him a little bit. But again, it depends on health with him too.
Yeah, I mean, he just can't really play more than 20 minutes a game. Like if you feel like we could bring him in and he could play 30 minutes a game I think they probably in a lot of circumstances would like to play him more. But with the injuries and like his style of play, I'm just not sure that he can go that much more because he is a very good fit in a lot of ways, in a lot of lineups. But yeah, I mean, I think something, maybe it's 10 million a year at the most, but then you get a discount for the fact that you opted him out of that player option, or sorry, that team option in the last year, gave him some extra money. So
Yeah.
if you want to say it's or you might also just say we're gonna hold on to him. I think you don't necessarily want him making it to the open market though, but you could also just do the extension without declining the team option and then just have it start next year too. I mean, I guess that's the other thing.
Which is something worth considering for them because they need to use their non-taxpayer MLE on a center the way they're set up right now, unless there's a trade that we don't know about. Like if in the absence of a trade, they have to sign a center, and that's
absolutely true.
That's going to take up most of their float between where they are now and the tax line. So when you add to that by putting in more money this year on Alvarado, you can get to a precarious place. And again, we're talking about the New Orleans Pelicans here. No fucking chance they're paying the tax. So that's just the reality of their situation. So you have to plan for that accordingly.
Yeah, so I think they're probably better because what we actually were talking about is them opting him out and signing him to a new contract, not an extension. Yeah. This coming off season, but it's all part and parcel of what he would get on an extension. And so yeah, I think maybe you just do the extension and do it at 3 years 27 or something like that for the extension, and you can always move him later too. But I think they got to get that center, and they got 14 million below the tax. So if you pay him more this year, now you're out of room to sign that center with the full mid level. Man, all right. There are a lot of these. So you want to pick a team here?
Denver Nuggets.
Let's do it.
Very interesting situations here. KCP, you can technically sign him to an extension and not let him hit the market, which is interesting. It would be 4 years for 96, which feels like maybe an overpay, especially given his age. But it would also lock him in for 24-25 at just $15.4 million and might let you boogie under the second apron for another year.
Yeah, that would be the purpose of that, is to get him so he on a low. If you feel like his market is going to be like 20 million a year in free agency, this just lets you shift everything later to when the cap's going up, and yeah, that'll end up being a bad contract. But you're ready to go right now. You can push the second apron off another year, and yeah, that would be the reason to maybe do that. But what do you think is that all is just based on what his market is going to be in free agency, and like he might be his floor is the mid level, you would think, right? But whether it's more than that comes to, does a team like say Philly strike out on some of their primary guys and offer him a Bruce Brown type of deal?
I think even in the absence of that, a team that just it takes a team with cap space is the hard part. But somebody who's just looking for a starter is going to give him 20 to 25.
Yeah, I mean, even in Orlando, they might be like, all right, we'll just have him replace Gary Harris as our starter too, right? Like maybe that's where they end up.
Will they sign Christian Brown in 3 years?
Yeah, it was funny actually. I once had a conversation with Tim Connolly years and years ago about whether Gary Harris or KCP was better. And I won't mention who it was that he picked at the time, but It was
Wow.
it's ironic that KCP right after Conley left ended up being on the Nuggets and winning a championship with them.
Yeah.
Aaron Gordon's another fascinating one, right? Gordon is 29 right now. He has 1 year left and then a player option. I do think that he may not have as much of a market just because his low shooting ability, it works so much better in Denver than it does anywhere else. And he's also very reliant on his athleticism to finish around the rim with dunks and offensive rebounds. That could wane. He could get a 4-year, $143 million extension, and his player option is only 22. I think he'll clearly opt out of that.
Yeah.
Where do you think, what would be a reasonable offer for him? I mean, I think, he certainly would sign 4 for 143. That's, $35 million a year? That seems reasonable, but that would take you from age 30 to 33.
I think his market value is probably not too far off that, especially his
No.
value to the Denver Nuggets. The biggest question you have, as you point out, is what is his value to other teams, right? Because we had a couple players like that in Memphis where Zach Randolph and Tony Allen were very clearly more valuable to the Memphis Grizzlies than they were to most of the other teams that could potentially sign them or trade for them. And so there was this dissonance a little bit between, Grizzlies value and standard NBA team value. And I think you get into that with Aaron Gordon, where between the chemistry he has with Nikola Jokic, his ability to play backup five with a second unit, and his ability to kind of hover around the rim in their offense make him much more valuable to the Nuggets than he would to generic Team X. So does that let you take a haircut on his number a little bit? Because I think for the Denver Nuggets right now, he is like a $40 million player. But was he that player, for instance, in Orlando? Like, I don't think he showed signs of becoming
40 million,
that player, but
40 million seems like a lot. Like that, the 25% max this year is 35. Like he's not a 25% max player to anybody. But and OG Anunoby may get in that range at his age as a free agent, but he's just a much better shooter, and I would say even more versatile defender than Gordon as well. Like I think right now, Gordon is kind of in the low 30s per year.
Okay.
But that, under this current cap environment, if it goes, the more it goes up, obviously that changes, but he also is getting older. I guess this is a question too. And Jamal Murray is also extension eligible. We'll hit on him, I'm sure, next. But if you're the Denver Nuggets, you could kind of go one of two ways, right? Like Jokic is about to be 30. Are you viewing it as, okay, KCP, Aaron Gordon, we're going to re-sign these guys. That's who's going to take us through the rest of the time that Nikola Jokic is going to be, a true force, which is probably, maybe 2-3 more years where you see him as being like the best guy in the league, close to that. Once he gets to 33, 34, that's particularly on defense, he's probably going to decline enough that it just he won't be at that level anymore. So you're like, what can we do to maximize this next 3 years? Is it just bringing these guys back and what if it doesn't work next year? Now these guys are on bad contracts, we can't really pivot at all. Or are you saying, let's maybe we let KCP go if he is being offered $80 million guaranteed elsewhere, and we'll go into next year with Christian Braun as a starting 2 and Gordon, and then maybe Gordon just leaves and we try to reset some around Jokic and Murray, or maybe even Michael Porter Jr. gets traded as well. Which of those two plans are you thinking is the one that you would think is most likely to be followed?
See, I think they already deviated from the plan I would have taken, which I would have gone all in on the team they already had. And that starting 5 they had this, even this last year. And they kind of tried to get cute and draft, we'll draft some old players and they'll be able to come in right away and help. And drafting old players with late picks, like the history of that isn't really great. The Zeke Nagy extension obviously is a unfolding disaster, even though the extension hasn't begun yet. So they're already partway down the wrong path to me. The KCP thing is interesting because they just don't have enough shooting right now, and so it's not even losing the on-ball defense, where he's important too. but you need those perimeter threats to weaponize Jokic, and especially if Gordon's going to be in the dunker position all the time. Where is your spacing coming from on this team in the future? Because even your young guys are mostly guys who don't shoot. Like, is Julian Strother the key to your dynasty? Like,
yeah.
So I'm a little vexed that way, and to me especially, like, you got to pay Murray. Like, there's no doubt about that to me. And he's eligible.
So you're paying him just the max 4 years, 208.
Yeah. I would 100%.
Yeah. You can go into the season on that with him if you wanted to, but yeah, I mean it is like that'll be Jamal Murray, and Ingram was another one. It'd be an amazing test case. Like, we've seen how good Jamal Murray has been in the past. You know, if he had just had the same playoffs that he had in 2023, number one, the Denver Nuggets are probably still playing, and number two, this would be a total no-brainer. But, like, is this a situation, given their proximity to the second apron, where they actually, like, try and negotiate? Is it like, oh, man, you can't piss off this guy? Like, it's a market like Denver. You got to just pay him the max that you can? Like, you know, that's maybe not a great contract. And there is a big opportunity cost with the second apron for what you're going to pay him. So do you try to say, no, we'll offer you a 4-year deal now. And you also might say, like, he could still make All NBA next year, which if he does, then you're happy to pay him a designated veteran extension. Like, I'm very interested to know what kind of fortitude they're going to have. And I'm not even sure whether showing fortitude would be wise or not. Of, like, to just not offer him that maximum extension, whether maybe there's a feeling like he just wants to try to make All NBA next year or something too. I don't know that him making All NBA next year is like the best thing for the Denver Nuggets in the playoffs, though, because he might be exhausted. Who knows?
Yeah, the Halliburton effect. And again, I mean, the other way for Denver to manage this potentially is trading Porter. But again, what is Porter's market right now? Probably not great. And no. That goes beyond basketball. I mean, the health worries with him are still there. And then again, he's the shooting right now, right? Like, how are you existing offensively with subtracting that shooting unless you have ways to replace it? I think ideally trading Porter for two guys who are pretty good would do wonders for them, just from a depth situation and kind of lineup variability and whatnot. I thought they really missed Bruce Brown this year, but the mechanics of how you actually do that are just so hard. So to get back to your original point, I think they're boxed into a point where, yes, keeping KCP is the only option. And, you know, you could maybe let it play out a little on these Gordon and Murray situations. I mean, you do know that, like, if Gordon has a bad year, you could have him opt in and extend off of that.
That's right? A great point, actually. Yeah, you could. I mean, you might even be able to do that anyway. But
and yeah, because you could add the extra year to it at that point too.
Well, and maybe yeah, exactly.
So that's a ball you might want to keep in the air. I think Murray's tougher because him going to unrestricted free agent, then that becomes a big wild card. You know, Toronto is going to plunge all in for him. So other teams surely would be interested too. Not very many good players become free agents anymore. He's unrestricted. You have no matching rights. Like, that's a risk you probably cannot take.
Yeah. Now, you also could offer him 5 years, you know, as a free agent, right? Like,
yes, that's true. That's true. The other, and that could be a reason for him to turn down an extension, actually, is to say, you know what, I'm going to try to get my Supermax, and I'm going to try to get 5 from you guys a year from now. But if you did do that extension for 208, you could say, no player option in the last year, when he'd still only be 30, 31. It, you know, could leave you in a bad spot. And you might even, we've seen deals where it's a soft non-guarantee on year 4, and those are almost done to please the owner as opposed to as opposed to true risk management, where it's, if you completely collapse and turn into a bag of turds, this fourth year only becomes half guaranteed, and otherwise it's full. So I mean, that was basically
say maybe if like 22 million of a guy's $34 million.
Exactly, I was going to bring that up.
ETO,
Nate is referencing
that sort of thing.
our max contract with Mike Conley when we re-signed him. Yes.
Yeah, which amazingly was not a bad contract.
No,
it was not a bad contract. Amazingly,
no, it was traded
him for positive value. Yeah,
yeah.
But yeah, that Denver thing is fascinating. Vlatko Čančar, just to a guy I've always liked. Maybe you could do him on kind of like that John Konchar. I mean, hey, if Konchar got it, then Čančar should get the exact same contract, right? Like, $6 million a year. He's coming off the torn ACL. I think he can actually help them
this
this
window
year.
Open? Sorry.
Okay, let's do a couple more teams here. I'll let you pick the next one.
Oh, okay. Should we talk about Miami?
I think we kind of have already with Butler. Like he can opt out of that 52 million and then get 54 estimated in that first year, which is next offseason, and then 59. So that's I think we've hit on him when we were talking about some of the trade candidates. So I don't know. Would you
do Bam?
Oh, obviously, yeah. I would offer him the maximum that you could, for sure.
Because he's eligible for a 3-year extension right now.
Yeah, and it would be 30% of the cap. Yeah, I think I would. It doesn't kick in till 26, 27. So you kind of, the later it kicks in, kind of the worse it's going to be. But I think in terms of like, you don't get that little cap bump. Like the later it kicks in, you're on the cap as it exists then.
Yeah.
So, it's 3 years, 165. Like, Bam is, I think I would still offer that to him, though.
And then the other wrinkle available to Miami is they could have Caleb Morton opt into his player option and then extend for 4 years, $78 million.
Oh, good point. Yeah, it doesn't seem like they're headed that way, though.
I completely agree with you.
I think he's going to get now maybe that's a way for him to get more than the full mid-level, right? That's although how could he possibly know what he's going to get if he he doesn't even decide on opting in and opting out this league year. He can't even be contacted by these other teams until after the league year switches over. How can he possibly weigh that? You just got to guess, I suppose, right?
Intuition. There's just been a lot of really good intuition these last few free agent markets. Really good.
But that is an interesting one, right? If they really feel like they can't lose him, you opt him in, and then you could bump him up, and ultimately over that 5-year period, pay him more than what he might get for the mid-level somewhere else. That's an interesting thought. Now, do they feel like their books are like opening up the year after that? Like, is that a great contract for him? He's already 28, so you're talking. That's an interesting thought, though. Yeah, the Josh Hart of like opt into the lower player option, and then we'll just pay you more in the later years. So, what did you think on Bam? Did you think you would do that? I mean, you are talking 2 years out, right? So when that kicks in, so you're talking about his 29 through 31 seasons, making about $55 million a year.
Yeah, I think I might hold off on that and get more information. You could do a 4-year extension, obviously, for him a year later. I probably wouldn't rush into that. I'd be a little skittish about somebody who's not really an elite offensive player. When you talk about paying him $50 million a year, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know he's like the keeper of the hashtag heat culture flame and all that, but I would just gather another year of information, I think, before I went down that road.
Interesting. Okay. let's talk about this team next, the New York Knickerbockers.
Yes, I was wondering if you were going to go there.
So, yeah, which guy do you want to start with here? We've got
Jericho
Julius.
Sims.
We've got, Boyan Bogdanovic, probably not going to happen, I don't think. That would have to be like he takes a very low extension. They may not even guarantee his salary. We'll see where they end up. Anunoby, like, is there any way? Like, it doesn't really make sense to opt him in and then like offer him the max after that. I think you would rather just get that contract started.
Yeah, I'd say
given that you still have Brunson on a cheap deal.
I'd say that's OG Anunoby on the extension. Yeah, he's just going to opt out and sign a new deal. Because they're already talking. His whisper number is between 35 and 40. So he's going to make more than that extension amount.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, they couldn't opt. Yeah, that was a stupid suggestion.
Now, Brunson is an interesting one because...
Yeah, there's a little... I think there's some reporting, which I don't know if I buy, about like he might actually offer them a discount by just taking this extension.
Which is interesting. I mean, he would decline a player option that he's certain to decline anyway. And yeah, to lock in for 156 over 4 when, that is his chance to get a monstrous bag, right? And if he has a year like this last one, he could be a $200 million player, right?
More than that, he would be eligible for a 5-year deal at the 30% max. That would be, let's see if I can get it here. Yeah, so what he could get in a 5-year deal would be 5 years, $270 million. And the maximum extension that he is eligible for right now is $156.
Yeah, so
you're talking about basically a haircut then of not even talking about the possible 5th year. You're talking about a haircut of like about $50 million over those first 4 years of the deal. Like he's basically making $10 million less than his max every year.
Yeah.
Like, can they just like pay his dad the extra $10 million to assistant coach for him?
I'm gonna zip my mouth shut now. But yeah, I have a hard time in reality seeing him. It's amazing for the Knicks if he does. I have a hard time seeing him take that extension versus playing out the year and the bank he could get from the Knicks at that point.
Yeah, that would be, now if he does that, everyone always talks about like what a winner Jalen Brunson is and what an amazing teammate he is. If he actually does that, I would be extremely impressed at his selflessness. But it would be hard. It's hard to remember the last time someone acted that. That's a lot of money to give up. Now the one thing you could say is that he at least is like locking in getting paid, but it's hard to imagine a circumstance in which he wouldn't have like $38 million a year. He could tear his ACL and probably get a 4-year, $38 million a year contract from somebody next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of course he's making 24 next year, and so he can only start at 140% of that. How about Julius Randle? That one is kind of, because from a decision-making standpoint with Brunson, all right, you obviously offer him the max, and if he doesn't take it, then you go into free agency and you pay him what he's worth in free agency. Like that's a pretty easy decision tree for the Knicks. Randle, who is 29 and a half years old right now, has a player option for 25-26 at $31 million, making $29 next year.
Who's outbidding you for Julius Randle in the 25 free agent market? Like to me, this is one where you just have to play it out with the Knicks. You have the player option sitting there that you could maybe do an extension off of in 25-26 as well, depending on how you want to manage your cap. Because this also depends on what other opportunities are out there for them a little bit, right? Given Brunson's situation, and B, their own, desire to sign another star or whatever, they may decide that they want to be a cap room team in 25, which they have the option to do right now if Randle opts out. So I would keep my flexibility on that one. I would see how Randle fits in with Team Villanova next year, and just kind of how all this goes with Anunoby being there, and how does he look health wise, and there's just a lot of variables here.
I would say one thing. I don't think they can be a cap room team in 25 if they re-sign Anunoby. I think they don't really have much at that point. Even if because Brunson has a $37 million cap hold, and Anunoby would be, he's making 35, so they might be able to get like 20 million.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So yeah, I don't think they could get up to the max there, and also Hartenstein too, who they need to bring back. So yeah, I wouldn't say that that's as much of an option, which is maybe part of why you pay him. Like, does he have more trade value if he's extended or not extended?
I don't know if he has trade value if he's extended for the full amount that he could be extended for. Right? Like, he could do a 4-year 181 extension, right? That is a Zach LaVine special right there, right? Knicks are going to call for a trade, and teams are going to be like, yeah, no. If they, can they get him in the, for 2 years in the 30s or something, then. But I don't know why Randle signs that at this point, because he's probably thinking, if I have another year like I had 2 years ago, then I'm a 5-year max guy or close to it.
I mean, he was good this year too. I guess. I mean, that's what's going to be so fascinating about him, like just the overall fit issues. Like, he's actually pretty valuable on this team, I would say, but he also, if they get in another player who's better than him, then all of a sudden his fit issues become a major problem. You almost would rather he be like coming off the bench or something.
Yeah.
And so is he like, yeah, I've made All NBA twice, and I've been an All-Star as many times as I have, and yeah, that's like no brainer, max contract, at least, something like the 25% max. Now, the last time after 21, he signed a 3+1 for his maximum extension that he could. And so is he going to be like, yeah, you know what? I'm a quote unquote all-star, but like there isn't that much out there for me, and I want to just continue to get paid, very, very good money. So like, would he take an extension at $35 million a year for 3 years or something? Like, because that's probably the most I would do as the Knicks.
Yeah. That gets fascinating. Yeah. Would you sign her to that extension and be like, okay, now, by the way, you're going to be our sixth man next year?
Yeah. And even, what you could do too is like, you could sign him to something that he would be immediately tradable on, right? Like 100, you can go 3 years out or 4 years out, including the remaining years in the contract, and up to 120% raises. You could sign him to something that would immediately be tradable, even like that. So that might be, maybe that's my ceiling. But that's.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Not that teams would be clamoring to trade for, but that would be legally tradable right away, as opposed to the extensions that are worth more. Yeah.
Yeah. You wouldn't be subject to the 6-month Melo rule.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really. I can't wait to see what's going to happen on that one, because
I'd probably go to midseason on that one before I really.
Yeah, no, I certainly would too. I think I would want to see how it was going. I mean, and also you see how much you get Anunoby back for. You see what if Brunson is willing to take this cheaper extension. Now you actually have more wiggle room maybe to sign Randle. I assume James Dolan is willing to pay whatever from a tax standpoint, but of course you have all the system restrictions too.
Now, Randle is not eligible to sign an extension until late August, so you will have a lot more information by the time this comes up.
Yeah, and you also just kind of see where the market is going as well. One more team?
Yeah, why don't you pick one?
Okay. Let's see here. only one player on here that probably matters to me.
Okay.
But that's Kevin Durant with the Phoenix Suns.
Yes.
Can sign due to the over 38 rule, because he's going to turn 36 this fall. He's be eligible to sign this on August 8th, but he could sign for a 1-year, $60 million basically extension. He's got 2 years left. He's at 52 and 55 million. But the big deal there, number one, is possible his declining performance, and number two, the Suns, like you talked about, those 2-year second apron runs, the way that they get out of the second apron is by him having a much lower contract 2 years from now or not being on the team.
Are you saying you don't think Bradley Beal will opt out of his $57 million that year?
It might not happen.
Yes, the Suns are up against,
and also this one would have to happen before the start of the season.
Yeah, I just don't know why you would commit to that now when you already have him under contract for 25-26, and you could sign him to an extension in the summer of 25. I just don't know why.
You may not be aware of this, John, but Kevin Durant has like a little bit of a history of not being that happy where he is, and he's even requested a trade before.
Really?
Yeah.
So I actually, do you think he's more tradable with or without the extension at this year's trade deadline?
Damian Lillard says without.
Yeah. So I think I would just hold back on that if I was Phoenix.
But you're like, the whole theory of this team is that you're like trying to win a championship right now.
Yes. I just think the whole theory of this team is going to change. And so I would make sure.
But are you guaranteeing that?
I would get another year of information as to whether this theory was actually true, and then I would pursue, whatever is next based off that information.
But is it a self-fulfilling prophecy that if you do not extend him, that the team will be breaking up? I mean, I agree with you. I think you got to just hold firm, and you can just say, look, man, like, we didn't play very well last year. Like, we would love to give you a 2-year extension if, we actually make the conference finals this year or something. But, like, I don't, again, I'm not, like, someone who's in Kevin Durant's head, but, like, I do think that he, on some level, will acknowledge that they, like, didn't perform last year. But I don't know. I agree with you, like, because if you bring him back, like, let's say you want to continue this era 2 years from now, you need to bring him back on a longer deal that doesn't cost $60 million, so you can get out of the second apron at that point, or then you're in the truly draft pick, not only frozen but moved to the end of the first round situation if you've been in for more than 2 years in a row.
Yes.
Yeah, so I would not do it. I mean, if he offered me some kind of a discount, then maybe. But yeah, I'm not going to just offer him that max $59 million for his.
That would be
38 season. I'll skip that.
Think about how hard that would be to have your first draft pick in a decade pushed back to the end of the first round.
Oh my God. Hey, they have a pick this year.
For now.
All right, we're done here. We got a few more of these, obviously, to come that we'll have to hit on a part 2.
Ben Simmons, extension eligible.
There's some fascinating stuff here, for sure. Mikal Bridges will be a really interesting one.
Yeah.
Lots of fun guys coming up here. All right, we'll talk to y'all next time. Thanks so much for joining us. And if you're listening on the public podcast, please note we are having a free trial of Dunked on Prime. You can, of course, get all of your cap information, including this list of all the extensions that we are working off here. If you want to check it out yourself, you get the daily dunks. Dan Feldman's doing 5 days a week worth of writing for us, and Danny and I are doing at least 5 days a week of podcasts, and also we have our mock off season coming up as well. So check out those free trials available on Dunktown Prime. Link is in the show notes. Talk to y'all next time.